Hello everyone, my name is Abraham and I'm sharing this story with my mother's permission. I'll be telling it exactly as she told it to me, from her perspective. Before I begin though, there are two important things you need to know. First, these events took place between May 12th and June 1st, 2012, in Actopan, Veracruz, a city near Jalapa, where Santeria and witchcraft are part of everyday life. Second, I write this with deep respect for all who believe in the saint I'll be mentioning later. My only intention is to share what happened to us. With that said, here is my mother's story. In 2003, my daughter left for the United States with the aim of studying and working. Many years later, she returned with her husband, pregnant with my first granddaughter, who was born in May of 2011. 1 year later, financially speaking, things were not going as well as they had on the other side. The lack of a well-paid job affected her life and that of her family. That is why, after much discussion with her husband, they decided that he would look for a way to go back to the other side to work, so he could send them money and make their financial situation simpler. Because of this, it was decided that, from Jalapa, my daughter and my granddaughter would move to Actopan to live with us. Someone without a passport or visa must resort to illegal means to be able to cross. Thus, my son-in-law reached the border, contacted a Polero, and ventured to take the route that would lead him to his destination. However, we did not hear from him for weeks, almost 2 months without any news, until one day my daughter received a phone call. "Eli, how are you? How is the baby? I need you to listen to me carefully. They have me kidnapped. They want to use me to transport drugs, and if I refuse, they might kill me. Contact my mother so she can pay the ransom and get me released, please. I trust you. I love you, and give our daughter a kiss, please." As soon as he finished saying this, someone else snatched the phone from him. With a harsh, authoritarian voice, the other person gave my daughter an account number and a cell phone number to which she had to send proof of payment in order to free Daniel. Then he hung up without allowing her to say a word. Eli, my daughter, contacted her mother-in-law, but she did not believe her version of events, leaving my daughter to handle the situation by herself. At that time, my daughter was working at a well-known stationery store in Jalapa, and she traveled to work every day, passing by several roadside vendors who sold flower pots and plaster figures of every type and shape, including figures of La Santa Muerte, virgins, saints, and so on. A week after that phone call, between May 6th and 7th, someone knocked at the door. It was Daniel. "Danny, what a joy. How are you? Did your mother pay? What happened?" asked Eli. "I do not know, my love. One day they simply freed all of us and told us that if we tried to pass through that part of the country again and they caught us, they would kill us. That is why I decided to come back. I was afraid to try again," Daniel replied. "Thank God you are safe, that you are safe with us," Eli told him. All of us in the family were happy Daniel made it home safe and sound, without imagining what was about to happen, what was coming. A couple of days after Daniel's arrival, Eli woke up as usual to go to work, but unlike other days, that morning she felt strange. She felt ill, but as you know, work is work, and you have to go to avoid being scolded or losing days. Upon arriving at the stationery store, she tried to talk to her colleagues, but whenever she tried to express an idea, words unrelated to what she wanted to say came out of her mouth. She said things, words, phrases without any sense, which led the boss to think she was high or drunk, so the boss sent her back home to avoid any problems with customers. From that point on, her health began to deteriorate. She started with mild headaches that became unbearable. She stopped eating and began sleeping all day. There were times when the headaches were so intolerable that she would wake up complaining, asking us to give her something for the pain. There were nights when she awoke startled because of nightmares, always in the early hours of the morning, always after 2 in the morning. On May 12th, they decided to go to the Social Security clinic in Jalapa, where she was given emergency tests, but they all came out completely normal. Therefore, they only gave her medication for the headaches. That night, they stayed at her house because they did not manage to find a ride back to Actopan. In order to get there, one has to take a collective taxi, and after a certain hour, they stopped traveling out that way. During the night, everything was going normally. He was resting, until at some point in the early morning, she woke up screaming because of a nightmare. She had a nervous breakdown that triggered a convulsion. The fright was so huge that Eli lost control of her bladder, forcing Daniel to bathe her so she would snap out of it and realize it was only a nightmare. Because of that, it was decided that Eli, Daniel, and my granddaughter would move in with us in Actopan full-time, so I could help in any way possible and care for the little girl. Strange things began happening at home. Doors opened in the middle of the night. My daughter, in a half-asleep state, said she saw faces melting on the walls. She said that the flies passing in front of her were exploding, and that at night she saw a shadow coming down from the rooftop, down the stairs to the ground floor. We thought it was due to the nightmares she continued to have, and it is worth mentioning that the room where she slept started to become a cold room, very cold, despite hot weather outside. By May 17th, Eli had noticeably lost weight. She spent her time asleep and medicated. In his eagerness to help her, Daniel went to the market and began looking for someone to give him instructions or a contact for a person who performed limpias, or someone with knowledge of Santeria. Somehow, he managed to find contact information for someone known as the Lady of the Toys, and he ventured to search for her. When he finally found her, he understood why they called her that. Her house was a shack made of tin sheets and cardboard, with dirt floors and a huge front yard filled with every kind of toy. Stuffed animals, plastic dolls, small cars, baby dolls, balls, etc. Daniel explained the situation, and she told him, "Bring her here. Bring her so I can see what she has." Daniel got back to my house, told me what he had done and who he had met, and we decided together to take my daughter to see this lady. We got her up, dressed her, and made our way there. The lady came out to greet us as soon as she saw us arrive. She looked like a homeless person, short, disheveled, very dark-skinned. We went into her shack, where there was an altar to La Santa Muerte full of candles, many glasses of water, and eggs. She stared at Eli for a few minutes and then said, "You girl, you made a promise, and you have not kept it. That is why you are like this. They are charging you for the favor they did for you, and if you do not comply, you will pay with your life or with what you love most. Tell me, girl, what did you promise?" At that moment, Eli recovered a bit of awareness and said, "It is just that I do not remember if I said it or if I only thought it. I promised La Santa Muerte that I would buy her in purple and place her on an altar if she returned Daniel to me safe and sound." I did not know what to think when I heard that. Eli had never mentioned anything about her promise. We knew Daniel was a follower of that cult, and we respected him, but we had never seen her involved. "Musica," she continued. "I did not know what I was doing. I was desperate." The Lady of the Toys then told us, "You have to be very careful with what you think. You have to be very careful with what you say. And above all, you have to be very careful with what you do. I can help you, but I need you to bring me exactly what I am going to ask for." At that moment, the Lady of the Toys handed Daniel a list of needed items for the series of limpias she was about to perform. I did not know what to think. I was very afraid of that topic. I respected and avoided at all costs, but at that moment, there was no way to avoid it. She continued, "In addition to everything I am asking for, you are going to go to the Church of the Virgen de Fatima in the community of El Jícaro. There, you will ask the sacristan to give you oil from the lamps of the Blessed Sacrament, and then you will come back here so I can give you instructions," she said, pointing at Daniel. "Meanwhile, I will give her the first cleansing with branches, and we will begin the work." We said our goodbyes, but before we left her house, she said, looking at me, "One more thing, Señora. In addition to all this, there is a very heavy energy living in your house, and it is growing stronger with this situation." We returned home, which truly felt heavy. In the following days, there were manifestations we had never experienced before. We heard the dragging of heavy furniture, dishes falling, footsteps on the roof at night. I got in touch with my mother and told her what had happened, where we had gone, what Eli had promised, and what we needed to do. My mother, who is, like me, very Christian, told her pastor, and they planned to visit us as soon as they could. The next day, we went to get the oil at that church in the community the lady of the toys had mentioned. They gave it to us without asking why we wanted it. On May 19th, my mother arrived with the pastor, and I told him everything that had happened and everything the lady of the toys had said. He began, together with other sisters from his church, a very strong deliverance prayer. After this, Eli stood up and began to feel better. She asked for food and her headache even stopped. The pastor told me they would continue with their prayer work, but that, under no circumstances, should we go back to that Santeria place. They would work on my daughter's healing. Daniel did not agree. He was upset and argued that this would not help at all, that we needed to finish the work with the lady of the toys, because that was the only way to save her. After a couple of days of arguments and pleading, my daughter, wanting to avoid more conflict with her husband, decided to go ahead with everything the lady of the toys had asked for, including the oil we had gotten at the church. When they got there with her after the usual cleansing with branches, she gave them these instructions. She has to take 2 spoonfuls of oil and holy water for 3 days. I will take care of the rest of the work. Days went by, and my daughter began looking a bit better. At least she was no longer sleeping all day. They followed the lady of the toys' instructions to the letter, and she took her respective spoonfuls of oil and holy water, although I was not in agreement. To take our minds off the discomfort of those past days, we decided to go out to the Actopan Park. There was a fair going on, so plenty of stands to visit. The evening went by quickly, and when we got back to the house after that walk, Daniel and my younger son went to get dinner. I stayed alone taking care of my granddaughter because Eli had fallen asleep. Suddenly the power went out, but only in my house, not on the street. At that moment, from the shadows emerged Eli's silhouette, who decided to go lie down next to us. I felt scared. I was scared remembering what she had done and everything that had been unleashed by that unfulfilled promise. I decided it was better to pick up my granddaughter and head downstairs in the dark. I went out to check the breaker switches and saw that they had all been flipped off. When I turned them back on, the lights immediately returned. Even though the house was lit again, I was too afraid to go back upstairs to check on my daughter. I waited until the guys returned, and Daniel went to see Eli, who was lying in her room exactly the same as before, sleeping with her back turned toward the wall. On the morning of May 24th, the 3rd day was up for what the lady of the toys had prescribed. At the same time, the Christian church I attended was praying for Eli. The church my mother attended was also praying for her, and Daniel was praying to Santa Muerte for his wife. The house felt heavy. I was afraid. That night, we all said goodnight. I did my usual nighttime prayers and proceeded to sleep. In one room slept Eli with Daniel. In another slept my younger son, my granddaughter, and me. Screaming woke me up. It was Daniel. I looked at the clock. It was 2:38 in the morning. Mother-in-law, Eli will not stop crying. I'm going to make her some tea, give her a pill, but please stay with her, Daniel said. Immediately, he went down to the kitchen, and I decided to stay with her. She was lying down facing the wall. I started to stroke her hair, not knowing what else I could do for her at that moment. What hurts, my girl? You will feel better soon, you will see, I told her. Ma, píchame, pinch me, inject me, please, she said. I knew she was asking for an injection, but the nurse we knew did not start her shift until 6 in the morning. Eli was again starting to mix up her words, saying one word instead of another. I gathered my courage and placed my hand on her head, beginning to pray aloud, declaring her free of all evil. She started to turn slowly, looking me straight in the eyes with an empty expression, motioning me with her hand to be quiet. I was afraid. My heart was beating quickly, but I kept praying, declaring her free from all harm. My hand was still on her head, and she, with that empty, distant expression, was playing with the bracelets on my wrist until she started talking. I was wearing a t-shirt commemorating Mexican independence, and she began to read it, syllable by syllable, In, de, pen, den, sia de me, she, ko. But it was not her voice. It was a mocking, sarcastic voice that I had never heard before. I tried to continue my prayer, but she told me, "Be quiet," in an even deeper voice than before. She said it as if it were an order, which I obeyed at that moment. Daniel walked into the room right then. "Mother-in-law, what should we do?" he asked me. I did not respond. I went back to my room to check on my son and granddaughter. I was terrified, my heart was pounding, and then I heard Daniel calling me again, this time more desperately. I left my room, walked into theirs, and I saw Daniel sitting on the floor with his legs apart, and between them Eli, also sitting on the floor, completely contorted, bent like in a horror movie, with her eyes rolled back, completely white, and a puddle of vomit in front of them. I could not handle the sight. I wish I could say differently, but I ran back to my room. I knelt at the edge of my bed, and I remember very well the prayer I prayed, in which I asked God for strength to help my daughter and my son-in-law, that he would give me the strength to endure seeing her like that, or else I would die. I begged him to help me so I could help her. Daniel kept calling me, and just as I gathered the courage to stand up and leave my room, a loud thud resounded on the floor, and my granddaughter let out a shriek, followed by intense crying. Something had thrown her off the bed. I went back to pick her up, hold her, and calm her down. When I managed to soothe her, the house fell silent. I no longer heard anything from Daniel, and my granddaughter was no longer crying. There was only a nauseating smell that filled everything. After a few minutes, I heard Daniel talking to Eli very loudly, as if giving her orders, which she obeyed. "Walk, come down carefully, go to the bathroom," he told her. Daniel woke my younger son, asking him to watch my granddaughter, and then I went downstairs to see what was happening. As I left their room, it was a mess, as my daughter had vomited and lost control of her bladder. Daniel had taken her to bathe. I helped him dry her off, get her dressed, and we laid her on the couch. "Daniel, what happened?" I asked him with more fear than curiosity, not knowing if I really wanted to hear the answer. "Mother-in-law, Eli got really bad. She started yelling until she fell off the bed. Then she started convulsing. I did not know what to do. I kept calling her name, but she would not respond. The only thing I could do was take my Santissima pendant, hang it on her, and say that it should take me instead, that it should leave her alone. Little by little, she began to straighten out. Then I talked to her loudly so she would listen to me. 'Mother-in-law, I do not know what else to do,' he said. And then he began to cry. We stayed up all night, sitting on the stairs, exhausted, terrified, confused, and in disbelief at what had just happened. The sunlight suddenly lit up the house, and I called my mother and told her what had happened. She went to see the pastor who had come to pray for Eli, but he told her he would not go, because he had already given the instruction not to return to the Lady of the Toys, and we had gone anyway. I was not going to sit there doing nothing. I went to see the pastor of the church I attended, told him everything that had happened since the beginning, all that we had gone through, every detail. He listened intently, and in the end he told me, "I will go later. Look, I am having breakfast, and I have other things to do, but I will go afterward." I knew he was not going to go. I saw the fear on his face when I told him what had happened. My mother arrived with my younger brother in his truck to take us to Zalapa, so we could take Eli to a mental health clinic. People from Zalapa will know which one I mean, the psychiatric facility on Cerro del Mapetle. So we got ready to travel. All of us got into the truck, and Eli went in more asleep than awake. Along the way, I told my mother and brother everything that had happened. When we were halfway, Eli opened her eyes. "Where are we going?" "We are going to the doctor, Mija. You are going to get better," I told her. "I do not want to go." "We have to go because you have been unwell for many days." "No, we will not arrive." As soon as she said that, right after that exchange, the truck began having mechanical issues. A lot of smoke started coming from the engine, and it stopped completely, right on a curve near a community called 6 de Enero, 6th of January. Eli, with a mocking smile and sarcastic tone, told us, "I told you we were not going to arrive." We were there from 10 in the morning until about 6 in the evening. Eli stayed asleep most of the time, only waking up once for the following exchange with us. "Mom, what is wrong, mija?" "I am going to kill myself soon. I am going to kill myself." "Do not say that, mija. Think about your daughter, your husband, your family. Why do you say that?" "The voices tell me to do it." Then she went back to sleep. We arrived in Jalapa in the late afternoon, thanks to a taxi driver friend who came to get us. We arrived at the psychiatric facility, where they took her to emergency. They gave her an MRI scan which came out completely normal. Then she had an interview with a doctor, and I was present. The doctor asked Eli about her life, her family, and her daily activities. Eli did not remember anything about that, not even the date or the day. She recognized me, but nothing else. The doctor gave me instructions to keep Eli in an isolated place without any kind of weapon, or anything that could serve as such. He gave her medication that would keep her asleep most of the day, and he ordered some other tests. However, once that was done, they had to discharge her. On May 26th, we went to the hospital civil, where they were going to do the other tests. My mother, Daniel, Eli, and I were waiting there when a family friend came over to greet us. "Hello, how are you all? What are you doing here? Is everything all right?" she asked. "No, Rosie, my daughter is not doing well," I said, pointing to Eli. "But can you not see her face?" she asked, stepping back a little. "Look at her face. Eli has death clinging to her. I am going to talk to my aunt so she can see her and cleanse her. What do you think? Look, at this point, anything that might help us, any help we can get, I will accept it. Thank you, and I will be waiting for your news," I replied, very confused by the scared look on her face. Rosie went in for her prenatal consultation, and I did not see her again that day. Eli had her tests done, and then we left for my mother's house. The next day, May 27th in the afternoon, my sister-in-law came home from work. She worked with Rosie. I asked her if she had seen Rosie, thinking about that offer of help she had mentioned. Actually, she did not come to work. We were told she had complications with her pregnancy and was on the verge of miscarriage yesterday. Thank God they were able to stabilize her, and she is out of danger now. But she sent me a message with this address. She told me to let you know to take Eli there to see her aunt tomorrow. And that is how we arranged the appointment with Rosie's aunt, known as the Lady in Red. I prefer not to know whether the pregnancy issue was just coincidence or if it happened because she wanted to help us. The next day dawned, we got ready, and we went to the Lady in Red's house. I must admit that I was the one who did not want to go this time, but my mother insisted, and I agreed. Eli was still completely groggy from the medication she had been prescribed. When we knocked on the gate, a lady dressed all in white greeted us. We went inside, and in front of an altar full of saints and candles, there were 3 chairs, one facing the other 2. I let them sit in front of the lady, and I stayed off to one side in the corner. She asked them why they had come. Daniel began telling her everything in detail, but she ignored him. His words carried no weight for her, as though she could not hear him. Suddenly, she turned to look at me and very seriously asked me, "You are her mother, correct? Come here, please." I approached them, and the lady continued, "Look, she made a promise to something and has not kept it. It is collecting its debt with her life, and if for some reason she backs out, it will take the life of someone she loves. I believe it might be her daughter. Just look at her carefully, please. Eli, turn to your mother." When she said that, Eli turned to look at me, and I do not know how to explain it, but her face looked like a skull with skin. Her eyes were sunken, her cheeks and lips drawn in, and only then did I understand why Rosie was so frightened when she saw her. In truth, she had death in her face. I can help her. I can cure her. They tried a trans-purging on her, and they did not know how to handle it. That was what the oil was for, and that is why she lost control of her bowels during her collapse. Unfortunately, death is very possessive, and when it is promised something and it is not fulfilled, it takes revenge. Tell me, Eli, what did you promise? Eli told the lady in red what she had promised, exactly as she told the lady of the toys. But then, what do we need to do? I asked her, very nervous. What you must do is buy the figure she promised, leave it in a specific chapel, and then buy what I am going to request and bring it here. Then, looking at Daniel, she said, "The hardest part will be for you. You will have to renounce her. You can only thank her for all the good she gave you, but then you must renounce her forever. It is your decision. You are the head of this family. What do you decide?" Daniel thought it over for a while, reflected on it, and finally agreed. The lady in red then proceeded to give him a series of instructions on what to buy, where to do it, and when. The appointment was set for the next day. I did not go. It was no longer about me. Throughout that entire day, my granddaughter would not stop crying. Nothing calmed her. We had to go to the pastor of my mother's church, and thanks to a prayer he made, my granddaughter was able to calm down. During the day, they took the image to the designated altar, and Daniel left there his pendant, the same one he had placed on Eli to make her react on that night. They performed a cleansing at their home and did everything the lady had told them to do. Over the following days, Eli finally began feeling better. She no longer slept all day. She started eating more, could speak better, and stopped taking the sedatives she had been prescribed. Her life went back to what it had been before. We asked her if she remembered the things she dreamed, the things she said, or what she had done, and she always said she did not remember anything. To this day, she still does not remember. They decided not to stay in Jalapa, so they moved to Toluca in the state of Mexico, and so they did. The next week, they sold some belongings, packed what they could, and decided to move on with their lives in another state. My younger son and I had to return to my house where I had not been for a few days. I was waiting for the school year to end so I could leave Actopan. That month I stayed there. I lived with a lot of fear. Eli would send me messages telling me how her life in Toluca was going, about my granddaughter and my son-in-law, but that did not calm me. I could still feel something in the house, something that had not yet left. I slept with the lights on and kept my Bible open to Psalm 91. Then, after a few weeks, that page was simply torn out of my Bible. In the room where Eli slept, we threw out everything: the bed, the mattress, all her clothes. The tiles on the floor where she vomited were cracked. It was a long month, a very long month. The day the moving truck arrived, my neighbor came over to say goodbye and asked a question that stirred up my anger. "Neighbor, good afternoon. How is your daughter? She was in really bad shape, was she not? We heard her screaming, we heard her crying every night. The poor thing never got any rest." As he said that, I remembered that apart from the night of May 25th, Eli always slept without making noise. Her complaints about the headaches were always in a low voice. Supposedly, nobody screamed in that house. "Yes, neighbor, she was unwell, but she is getting better now in Toluca." "Good thing you solved that. Possessions are really common around here. In that house you were renting, all the tenants have complained because, according to them, every single one, without fail, has seen someone coming down the stairs. Good thing you are leaving." I was stunned while the neighbor helped us load boxes. I felt angry to know that everyone there knew something inhabited that house, and yet they all kept quiet. Nobody had ever told us anything. When we finished loading everything, I thanked the neighbors for their help and went inside that house one last time with my younger son. Whatever is here stays here. It does not belong to us. We do not belong to it, and it is not coming with us. It stays here, I said aloud. We locked that door, and we finally left that house, never to return.